You are tuned in to Iggy's Fantasy and Betting, the podcast that puts trophies on your mantle and money in your pocket. Now, your host, coming to you high from the Rocky Mountains, IDP Iggy.
Oh, yeah. What's up, beautiful people all around the world, all around the world, all around the world. Hey, we're getting closer and closer to episode 200, man. We've already got a special show lined out for you Saturday, dealing with Aaron Rodgers. Pretty interesting to have, you know. I think it's pretty cool that he came out and basically said everything that I said in that show verbatim. It's how in tune I am with my Green Bay Packers, baby. But it's going to be Tybo on the show Saturday. Make sure you tune in. We're going to have a very good show. Talk about Aaron Rodgers, talk about some sleepers, talk about some Super Bowl predictions. It'll be really good. But today's all about the running backs. All about the running backs. That's what we're going to be looking at today for the player props. It is Thirsty Thursday. You're tuned in to Iggy's F&B. Make sure you go subscribe on YouTube. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, all the social grams, TikTok, all that stuff, man. We're getting in there. We're getting after it. We're going to just subscribe to us, follow us. Let's go win a championship. That's what I'm going to help you do. We're going to help you put money in that pocket. I'm going to put trophies on the mantle. Your friends are going to respect you. We're going to go win your league. You're going to dominate them. You're going to get to talk shit for a year. That's what this show's about. If you notice, I did take a little bit of a hit. Feeling a lot better this morning. Went ahead and did that one right off the bat. Whoops, sorry about that, YouTube. And, yeah, dude, I'm feeling really good about it. We're going to keep it rolling. Like I said, today's show's all about running backs, though, baby. That's what we're going to be targeting today. We're going to be looking at regular season yards. We're going to be looking at touchdowns, rushes touchdowns. Got them both pulled up for you. It looks like they almost have this alphabetical, so that's kind of nice. It's kind of weird. The first two being alphabetically ordered. The first two are A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. A.J. Dillon's yards props are 690 for the season. -120 on that for the under. -110 on the over. Aaron Jones is at 1,050. For -115 either way. So just a tad over strictly rushing yards for Aaron Jones. Let's take a look at that real quick. Aaron Jones had 1,104 rushing yards in 16 games with 9 touchdowns, plus another 355 with 2 in the air. A.J. Dillon obviously didn't have that last year. We will be checking that out for him as well, though. Austin Ekeler, let's see what he has. It's kind of nice that they're both alphabetical order. So it goes into Alvin Kamara with 945.5 rushing yards on the over-under. His under's at -130. His over is at 945.5. I think that could be a really good bet, just simply because Alvin Kamara is going to have to be so much, even with Latavius Murray there. Alvin Kamara had 932 rushing yards last year with 16 touchdowns. Wow, that's a lot of touchdowns, 16. And he had 756 through the air with 5 touchdowns. So 21 touchdowns altogether for Alvin Kamara. And he's looking at, what is that, 6, 8, and then 8. He had 1,688 yards total as well. His rushing line is a little higher than that right now. Something to keep in mind as well. Moving along, we got Alvin Kamara Austin Ekeler set at 825, 825.5, -120 to -110 on those lines. Keep in mind, once again, everybody, this is just rushing yards only. Let's see where he was at. I don't think he finished quite that high. It doesn't look like he finished even in the top 25. Let's see. No. I guess that's to be expected if you don't play 16 games. Austin Ekeler had 530 yards on the ground last year with 1 touchdown. Let's look at these betting because they're right beside each other. with the touchdown bet too. Aaron Jones is supposed to get 9 regulars. Was that 9 touchdowns for the season? -120. Alvin Kamara was at 10. I just told you his. Austin Ekeler's is at 6. Rushing touchdowns. That'd be hard for him to maybe do. So when we take a look, I just saw Antonio Gibson for the rushing yards too. Regular season rushing yards 1,025.5. Both of those are at -115 at over or under. So you get to kind of take your pick on that, whichever way you would like. And let's see here. Just move this list over here. I keep flipping back and forth, and I really just need to have it closer because Gibson had J.D. McKenzie right there actually, who had 365 rushing yards and 589 passing yards. It's pretty interesting. 3 touchdowns total, but we're talking about Gibson's rushing yards as we look at them right now. 795 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns. The man's a beast. His rushing yards were set at Antonio Gibson's was at 1,025.5, like I said. So just keep that in mind. Could go either way. Chase Edmonds, with the Arizona Cardinals, I think he's going to be the featured back. He's somebody I kind of been taking a lot more serious look at lately in all my best balls. I drafted him 3 times yesterday, and he's at 650.5, which isn't very much for rushing yards. His under is actually set higher at -130 than his over to go over 650 yards is at 100. Another plus 100 I feel really good about. I felt good about Kamara's. I felt good about Chase Edmonds. If you're looking for a positive, even bet, season long, you get 17 weeks to stretch that money out, so it's not like it's a bigger hit for people that are just kind of doing gambling for fun. Very interesting prop to me, I think. Chase Edmonds, I think he's going to be a lot better than people are giving. I think he's going to have well more than 650 rushing yards as long as he stays healthy, All right, moving along to Chris Carson, one of the famous. His touchdown line is set at 7.5 at -115 either way. His rushing yards total is at 1,000.5 yard even. Obviously, the deal with Chris Carson is going to be health. So you're going to be healthy enough. And if you go look at that Seattle defense, Tyson talks about it Saturday. There's a lot of running backs. I mean, it's the depth chart's unreal. You got Penny, you got Homer, you got somebody else that was on there last year. I can't think. There's just a lot of running backs. But the truth is, Chris Carson, if he stays healthy, there is no reason that it shouldn't be, his job, and he's only getting to spill when he's tired. Last year, his yard totals were 681, 5 touchdowns, 287 receiving yards with another 4 touchdowns. You wouldn't really think that from Chris Carson. He actually had more touchdowns than David Johnson, Miles Sanders. These are receiving touchdowns. He almost had more than Kareem Hunt. Had more than Chubb, more than Jacobs, more than Robinson. Kamara had more. He pretty much had more receiving touchdowns than just about anybody besides Alvin Kamara. Chase Edmonds had 4. Chase Edmonds' rushing yards last year were 448 with 1 touchdown. So I think that's another possibility too. But with Chase Edmonds having 4 receiving touchdowns, 417, he had about 1,200 total rushing yards, 5 touchdowns. Chase Edmonds. Chris Carson, 681 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns, 287 with 4 receiving touchdowns. Man, that's a lot. I didn't realize he had that many. Once again, Chris Carson's line has been set at 7.5 rushing touchdowns and 1,000.5 yards, just straight up. That's just how he has it set. All right, looking at everybody's favorite. Of course, Christian McCaffrey didn't have many yards last year, but he has so far the highest one for us. Looks like I see another one that's higher, but his over-under for his rushing yards are at 1,200.5 yards. So there's quite a few there. That's pretty high total. His under that is to be -130, though. His to go over 1,200 rushing yards is at plus 100. So if you're one of these people that think Christian McCaffrey is just going to nail it and carry Sam Darnold to some victories, that plus 100 is another evens bet for you. Like I said, and his touchdown total line has been set at 11.5, big guy. So he's more than capable of carrying you to the fantasy championship. This is talking about running back 1.1 off the board almost in every draft I'm involved in. The only time I've seen Dalvin Cook go like a couple times ahead of him, but for the most part it is Christian McCaffrey. And 11.5 touchdowns, man, that's nothing to golf at. It's almost a touchdown every other game. It's more than that. It's like touchdown every other game or 2 in here and there, which he should be able to get to. He's probably the biggest goal line threat on their offense. I don't know if Dan Arnold's going to step up and be like this big tight end touchdown monster from Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold does love his tight end, so that could happen. But sticking with the running backs, I think that's a pretty good set line. 1,200 yards, I think he should do that pretty easily, honestly. That's still a pretty good offensive rushing line. You saw what Mike Davis was able to do behind him last year, so I take that for what it's worth. All right, with another good guy that pretty hot on a lot of people's names. That's Clyde EdwardsHelaire. His touchdown line is at 7.5, -120 to go under, -110 to go over, so they do feel slightly better about his line going under. His rushing yards are set at 900.5, and that's -115 either for the over or the under. Man, I think that's a really good line. I think he has a good possibility to, let's see, rushing stats, trying to pull them up. Clyde EdwardsHelaire had 803 rushing yards last year. That's not too bad. And he had, let's see, he did that on 181 attempts, 4 touchdowns, like I said. So his touchdown line is at 4. Let's see what we got here. His touchdown line on the betting is 7.5. Like I said, -120 for the under, -110 for the over. I think that's very doable too. This is a deep offense that's not ever really going to take its foot off the pedal and try to wear down a team by controlling the clock. I think they're going to try to control the game by scoring a bunch of touchdowns and making sure you don't. That's kind of the philosophy. You can't score as much as them. 900.5 yards. I think he's good for the over on that, honestly. Might be a little bit optimistic, but I know he's got a lot of hype. He's got McKinnon and Williams backing him up, so he has a pretty clear pace. With rushing, I know they want to get the running back to the ball to the running back via the air a little bit more, but I still think 900 is right on par for it. DAndre Swift coming up next, 900.5 rushing yards on the under is -120, on the over is -110. Let's see what he's looking like on the touchdown. 8.5 on the touchdowns, -140 on the under, +110. Our biggest odds we've seen so far in either way is 8.5 to go over for DAndre Swift. I don't know if Jamal Williams is going to be getting some of those looks down at the goal line. I don't think he's necessarily a bigger back. He could be a little bit more explosive than Swift is. Let's see what Swift did in the yardage total. We'll have to go look for him over here. He didn't have the best, I don't think, fantasy year from a perspective. Let's see. He's not even on the first page over here for the rushing yards. Pretty good indication of where he finished last year. 521 rushing yards. He did have 8 touchdowns, though, so he could be a touchdown monster. And you got to remember, Adrian Peterson was on that team last year, and there were days where Adrian Peterson was getting all the goal line work pretty much. He had a few touchdowns. So DAndre Swift, DAndre Swift, I think he has a really good potential on his touchdown line to go over that. I mean, 8.5, and it's at +110. I think the only issue here is health. TJ Hawkinson's gotten a lot of looks in the red zone. They cover him pretty good, and he actually has quite a few drops in the end zone and just in general. So I think that's a pretty interesting angle right there that we found so far. It is the biggest odds we found. 8.5. He had 8 last year, +110. If you want to go the season long, better than evens bet. That might be our angle right there. Write that one on the board for us real quick, so we have it for later. Let's see here. All right, moving along. Dak Prescott rushing touchdowns on there. He's over 3.5 at -130, under 3.5 at +100. Staying away from the quarterback rushing touchdown. You're kind of asking for runs to break down. They did schedule pass plays for him and so forth, but I'm just not. I don't think Dak Prescott needs to be running around. I don't think Mike McCarthy thinks that either. So just be careful with that one. DeAndre Cook, let's get to some major names here as we kind of get through these. Dalvin Cook's rushing yards is set at 1375.5, -115 on the over-under on both of those. And then his touchdown line is at 13.5. My goodness, that's a pretty high one. I think that's the highest we've seen. And it's the highest rushing total we've seen also. He's predicted to get more rushing yards than Christian McCaffrey as well. So Dalvin Cook, injury prone, so always keep that in mind. He's been pretty good the past couple years to stay healthy, but That wasn't the case the first couple years of his career. 13.5, like I said, it's a lot. His rushing total's a lot with 1375. But what did he get last year? Let's take a look. Dalvin Cook had 1,557 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns. So just looking at those lines, he's good to go on both fronts, essentially. Got well over that for rushing touchdowns. They got well over that for yards. If you think he's going to repeat, I'll tell you what, the loss of the Vikings offensive line coach, don't let that ever underestimate you. He's been one of the best offensive line coaches anywhere he's been in the land. He didn't want to get a COVID shot, so he opted to sit out and miss out on a lot of money, but, to each their own. And I think there will be some regression. You don't just lose a great offensive line coach and still just keep on clicking and ticking. That's not really how it works. So watch out for regression. They have the line set very obtainable for him based off the numbers last year. All right, let's move along to David Montgomery. David Montgomery's line set at 1,000.5 yards. I love those. His under is actually negative 130. His over is plus 100. That's very interesting to me. I think that's a very safe bet. David Montgomery had 1,070 yards last year. Really didn't start putting it on until the end of the year, and he had 8 touchdowns. Let's see what his touchdown line is set at. 7.5. So he went right over that. Under's at negative 120. Overs at negative 110. Justin Fields is going to be in there. If he gets the start, look for them to use Montgomery a lot more. Allow him to just kind of ease up for Fields, because Montgomery's a guy that can go pound and ground and become a fourth quarter guy that just kind of wore down the team for you, which will help Justin. It'll also help Dalton. Andy Dalton, he's a pretty good play action quarterback. I don't care what people say. He had a good tight end. He made a couple of receivers look good, and he was able to do that pretty much right out of his rookie year. I think Andy Dalton's still an underrated quarterback. I'm not saying he's one of the elite, but I'm saying he's underrated. And I think that the touchdown in the rushing line is very obtainable. Derrick Henry, rushing touchdowns, also set at 13.5 like Dalvin Cook. His line's at negative 115 either way. So a little different than what they did for Cook as far as the odds. And then, of course, let's look at Derrick Henry's rushing yards. 1,555, my God. Blew him out of the water. The under's at negative 130. The over's at plus 100. Hopefully they don't have to just run him into the ground like that. But if you're feeling good about the under, it's at negative 130. If you feel like he can get closer to 2,000 yards again, it's at plus 100. I expect Derrick Henry to not have as much yards as last year. He's been going really hard. He's been proving that he's the best running back in the league for the past couple of years, and it's not even close debate. He got last year 2,027 rushing yards and 17 touchdowns. Only had 114 receiving yards, though. Keep that in mind. He is truly a one-dimensional back, but when he's so good at it, it doesn't matter. Ezekiel Elliott, rushing yards set up pretty high, 1,100.5 yards. The overs at negative 120, so they're telling you they think that he should go over that because the under's at negative 110 with a little worse odds. His touchdown line is set at 9.5 at negative 120 to go over once again, and under at negative 9.5. Telling you there's a big year and plan for Zeke. That's what they're telling you essentially. He only had 979 yards last year, his first non-1,000 yard season. He had 6 touchdowns though on the ground, 338 through the air, 2 touchdowns through the air. So Zeke does get it done on third down as well. I think he just kind of got a little lackadaisical. Probably got a little down on the dumps. Honestly, losing Dak Prescott, who wouldn't be? That's a big deal, in my opinion. I think that's not as easily overcome mentally or physically for a team. Well, let's just look at a couple more. We'll kind of close out the show proper. Let's see, Ezekiel Elliott. We'll go down into another 1,000-yard running back. We'll just kind of focus on the main ones. J.K. Dobbins is at negative 120 to go over 1,050.5 yards and is at negative 110 on the under. His touchdown line is set at, let's see real quick, J.K. Dobbins, 9 touchdowns, 9.5, straight up 9. Make sure there's a push. Negative 130 on the under, plus 100 on the over. And last year he did pretty good. He got 805 yards, started the season late, 9 touchdowns though. So if you're kind of one of those people that think Gus Edwards was signed to have a key role on this, make sure you take a look at that. If you think J.K. Dobbins is the truth, I don't see no reason why you can't get the overs here. Really easy. I think that's very obtainable. Let's look at some more 1,000-yard backs. Jamal Williams actually has a line of 525. Pretty interesting for the J.K. Dobbins. James Robinson is set at 670.5. If you think Carlos Hyde's going to take some of the snaps, look out. But I don't really know that the running back out of that played with Trevor Lawrence. That's going to factor in, but I kind of see him just being used more as a wide receiver than a running back, in all honesty. James Robinson's very interesting to me at negative 120, at negative 110 over 670.5. Doesn't seem like a problem at all. All right, let's get into some more starting running backs, though, without question. Joe Mixon set at 995.5 at negative 130 to go over, and his under is set at plus 100. I expect a pretty good year for Joe Mixon. Probably a safe long-term bet to go, basically to get 1,000 yards or just under. His touchdown line is set at, let's see here, 7.5 on the under, is at negative 120, on the over 7.5. I could see that. They're probably going to use Joe Burrow to score closer to the red zone. They got Thaddeus Moss back, kind of an underappreciated thing. So, once again, Joe Mixon, I think his yardage is good. I think his under is probably right about there as well. He got hurt last year, so he didn't have a full season. Jonathan Taylor coming in really hot. His touchdown line is set at exactly 11. The under's at negative 130. The over is at plus 100. His rushing yard total is set at 1,275.5 yards. I think just as much. Or, let's see. I'm just going to look at him real quick. Yeah, he's set to have more yards than Christian McCaffrey. Yet I just snagged him with the 12th pick in the first round of my best ball. I've got him in a lot of leagues. I expect big things from him. 1,275.5 yards either way on the over-under. It's set at negative 15. And once again, his touchdown total is 11. I wish this page would just stay down instead of doing that every time. So, yeah. And then we just look at, let's see, we look back here at player list. He had 1,169 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns. So pretty much right there. I know that people think Mack could be coming in. I know people think Hines should be getting it. They may be using a rotation. They may not want to wear out Jonathan Taylor. But I guarantee you there's going to be games where they just exploit defenses with him and just run it down their throat. I think Jonathan Taylor is good for both of those bets. If that's something you're interested in. It's a lot of yards, but I think he's good for it. Josh Jacobs is at negative 975.5 and negative 115 either way. Kyler Murray is set at 680.5 rushing yards. I don't think they're going to try to run with him that much. Lamar Jackson's line is set at 945.5 yards. Man, if Lamar Jackson gets 1,000 yards rushing again, watch out. He's going to be hot and carrying a lot of people. Leonard Fournette's set at 650. Miles Sanders is set at 1,000.5. I think that's very interesting. His under's at negative 120. His over's at negative 110. Miles Sanders, crowded backfield, can't seem to stay healthy. 17 games. If he does it, he should do that. I just don't know if he's going to. Myles Gaskin's starting running backs at 750.5. And his over's at negative 125. I'm telling you to think he'll go over it. His under's at negative 105. Pretty interesting. Najee Harris, the rookie, 990.5 rushing yards, negative 115 either way. I think he's going to be a 1K back. As long as he stays healthy, I think he'll be good. There's Travis Etienne. We just talked about him. His rushing line's at 650. Some specials there. Nick Chubb, let's go over him real quick. Rushing yards, 1,350.5 overs, negative 115 under as well. As long as he stays healthy, I think he can do that. Health is always the big issue with Chubb. Can he stay healthy later in the season? How much are they going to spell him with Kareem Hunt? Both interesting takes. Just have to look. Will Dalvin Cook have at least 2,000 regular season rushing yards? Is that plus 2,500? That's pretty interesting. I don't think it'll happen. Derrick Henry have at least 2,000 rushing yards set at plus 1,000. I don't think either one of those happen. Real quick, we'll just look at some of these tight end touchdown totals we didn't get away from. Josh Allen rushing touchdowns 8 is set at 8. Man, no respect for their running backs. I'll tell you that much. Josh Jacobs, look, Kyler Murray's is set at 7.5. Lamar Jackson set at 7.5. So if they all go over, that's 16 plus. That's 25 touchdowns between three running backs. Or three quarterbacks. 25 rushing touchdowns between three quarterbacks. Mike Davis, season regular total 7.5 touchdowns. His under is at negative 150. His over to get over 7.5 touchdowns is at plus 120. You got to think they're going to get some goal line opportunities. They're not just going to be throwing to Calvin Ridley and, well, Kyle Pitts is so huge with that big wingspan. My goodness. Yeah, that's a tough one, but if you feel good about it, plus 120, that's the best touchdown odds I've seen. Miles Sanders to go over 7 is at plus 122. Let's see, Najee Harris, 7.5, over -125. Under is at -105. Nick Chubb is 11.5 touchdowns, -115 either way. Trevor Lawrence, 3.5 rushing touchdowns. The over is at +100. If you feel like the kid's going to scramble and pick up a few, go ahead and do it. Ronald Jones is second. It's at 7, +100 again. So some pretty good odds. We hammered all the running backs. I think that was one of the best ones we talked about. Not Jalen Hurts, obviously. Dak Prescott, we said we were going to stay away from that one as well. It was just the rushing yards. I feel really good about Jonathan Taylor. There's not really a good, like the best odds on that, I guess, if you will. -115. But the +100, Derrick Henry, you might watch out for that one. Christian McCaffrey, we're feeling good. You want to stay with the guys that are going to get a lot of carries, a lot of volume. That's what it boils down to for me. So, we talked about it. Take your pick. I think some of those lines are set pretty high, particularly for the quarterbacks. If you like the season long under, take a look at that as well. All right, guys, glad to be with you today, man. It's Thirsty Thursday. Remember, go donate to Kawasaki Kids. Check it out, the organization we're with. #BraveKids, #Strong Hearts. The blind Olympic runner that has the pacer that's making a big deal. Well, he went blind because of Kawasaki's disease. He didn't go blind until he was like a teenager. So there's long-term effects for all this, and we need to get some research going. It's the leading heart disease in developed nations for children, and we still just haven't addressed it. Something we got to address. Let's take a look at it. Remember to subscribe on YouTube. Hit me up with any questions. I've been getting a lot of feedback lately in the Facebook group and some emails actually, so that's been pretty cool. Here's to you guys. Be safe, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.